They tell me this isn't Vietnam. They tell me it's different this time. Smarter, cleaner, precision warfare, they say, as if moral decay can be rebranded like a damn smartphone upgrade. I've been around long enough to smell the same rot behind every patriotic speech. The script hasn't changed, only the subtitles. They called Vietnam a noble cause, Iraq a liberation, Afghanistan a necessity, and now they call Venezuela a responsibility. That's Washington's word for a mess they're about to make. I've seen this movie before, and spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. In the 60s, they told us we were fighting communism. Now it's drugs, terrorism, or humanitarian intervention. The villains change, the excuses don't. It's the same old story of rich men writing checks that poor men cash with their lives. They'll tell you this one's for democracy. Sure, just like Vietnam was for freedom, and Wall Street is for justice. You can wrap greed in a flag, but it still stinks like greed. When I was a kid, I watched the footage from Vietnam on a black and white TV. Grainy, but clear enough to see the lies. They said it would be quick. They said the locals would welcome us. They said we were the good guys. Every empire says that right before it trips over its own arrogance. And now, decades later, they want me to believe that sending troops to Venezuela will bring peace to the Caribbean. Sure, and I'm the Pope. I remember how they sold Vietnam. Fear first, profits second, corpses third. Same order, different decade. Now they sell fear of cartels, fear of communists, fear of anyone who refuses to kneel to Washington's oil interests. The Pentagon has the same addiction Wall Street does, endless growth. Only their product is chaos. You can't build peace with a business model that depends on conflict. But try telling that to a room full of men who've never heard a shot fired in anger. They say it's about drugs, but I don't see them invading the countries that buy the drugs. They say it's about tyranny, but we arm tyrants every fiscal year. They say it's about freedom, but somehow the bombs always fall where the oil is. You'd think after Vietnam, people would learn to smell the bullshit before the napalm. But here we are, pretending history is a documentary instead of a rerun. I look at the generals on TV, pressed uniforms. Empty words. I've seen their predecessors reading from the same teleprompter 50 years ago. Limited engagement, they said. Quick operation. They said it then. They say it now. And they'll say it again when the first body bags land. Because that's how denial works. It wears a suit and calls itself strategy. The thing about Vietnam is that it never really ended. Not in our politics, not in our conscience. It's a ghost that follows every war America fights. Every time we bomb another poor country, we promise it won't be like that again. Every time. It is. The jungles just look different now. One had bamboo, the other has palm trees and pipelines. I'm told Venezuela is collapsing. I'm told we have to act. But I've heard that line before too. We were going to save Vietnam from communism. We ended up saving defense contractors from bankruptcy. And guess who's lobbying for this one? The same damn people who build the weapons, own the oil, and rent the politicians. They've never met a war they couldn't monetize. If you think this is cynicism, you're wrong. This is experience. Cynicism is born of bitterness. This comes from watching the same stupidity on loop. It's not even anger anymore, it's exhaustion. Because I know what comes next. The briefings, the lies, the medals, the funerals. And after it's all over, some senator will say, mistakes were made. Like the dead were just a rounding error. Vietnam was supposed to teach us humility. Instead, it taught our leaders how to hide arrogance behind better PR. You can dress empire in humanitarian language, but the boots still leave the same footprints. Every empire thinks it's smarter than the last one. Every general thinks he's got the formula right this time. And every graveyard tells the same story. They didn't. So when they tell me this won't be another Vietnam, I almost want to laugh. Not because it's funny, but because if you don't laugh, you'll scream. And I've done enough screaming for one lifetime. You know what's funny? The faces on TV never change, just the backdrop. In the 60s, it was a map of Indochina, with red arrows pushing south. Now it's a CGI map of Venezuela glowing in red. Same arrows, just better graphics. The same men stand in front of it, polished hair, empty eyes, expensive suits explaining why another country needs saving from itself. They always say stability, order, security. It's their holy trinity. They draw neat little arrows on PowerPoint slides, and I swear you can almost smell the lobbyist perfume in the air. These are the same types who sent boys to die in the rice paddies of Vietnam, except now they sign contracts instead of letters to mothers. They've learned how to make war sound like a business plan. Back then, they talked about containment. Now it's market stability. And you know what? They're both just polite ways to say profit. They don't fight wars anymore, they franchise them. I've sat in those briefings. I've seen the spreadsheets where human lives are line items and acronyms do the killing. ROE, A2, AD, ISR, all sanitized letters for organized destruction. They talk about kinetic action like it's a new fitness trend. They don't even need to send people anymore. Drones do the heavy lifting. Vietnam taught them one thing: don't show the body bags on TV. Now the dead are hidden behind satellite imagery and press embargoes. Death became data, and that's how they sleep at night. They say Venezuela's a narco state. Sure, and I'm the tooth fairy. If it was about drugs, they'd have invaded half of Wall Street by now. But this isn't about drugs, it's about resources. It's always about resources. They see a country with oil and independence, and that's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. Only this bull has a defense budget bigger than the next 10 countries combined. The same corporations that made napalm now make smart bombs. They even have better branding, precision-guided democracy. You have to admire the marketing. They can turn mass killing into a product launch. Somewhere, a PR firm is getting paid to write slogans for humanitarian missiles. Freedom. Now with 30% fewer civilian casualties. If Vietnam was America's tragedy, this is its sequel. Same cast. Bigger budget. Every time I hear a Pentagon spokesman say, "We're evaluating all options," I know what that means. It means they've already picked the one that makes the most people rich. Contractors will build bases, banks will finance reconstruction, and Congress will approve another temporary deployment. That word, temporary, should be outlawed. Vietnam was temporary. Iraq was temporary. Hell, the Cold War was temporary. You know what's permanent? The debt, the graves, and the regret. They'll tell you it's about stopping tyranny, but look closely, tyranny's just fine when it signs defense deals. If Maduro fell tomorrow and some U.S. friendly regime took over, the same guys calling him a dictator would be selling him F-16 seconds by next Thursday. That's how this works. The moral compass doesn't point north, it points toward whoever's buying. I sometimes imagine a museum of American interventions. One big hall of mirrors. Each exhibit labeled, "This time, it's different." You'd walk past Vietnam, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and now a corner reserved for Venezuela. The walls would whisper excuses: national interest, freedom, stability, and if you listen closely, You'd hear the same echo every time. We never learn. They love to say, history repeats itself. That's not true. History doesn't repeat. People do. The same men, or the sons of the same men, draw the same maps and make the same promises. They stand in front of cameras and call it leadership. But it's just a sales pitch with better lighting. The coordinates change. The arrogance doesn't. Vietnam was supposed to be the war that cured America of hubris. Instead, it became the model. We industrialized denial. We exported hypocrisy. We turned imperialism into a bipartisan hobby. Now we're watching the rerun and pretending it's a premiere. When I see them talk about Venezuela, I can almost hear the soundtrack, that same drumbeat of patriotic nonsense, swelling strings under the word freedom. The same slogans, the same applause, lines, the same press conferences. And somewhere in the back of the room, an old man like me sighs, because he's seen it all before and knows how it ends. With excuses. Always excuses. They keep saying it's about freedom. That word again. The most abused four-letter word in the English language. Every bomb, every sanction, every invasion, all baptized in freedom. When I was young, they said we went to Vietnam to protect it. By the time the smoke cleared, we had burned down half the country to save it. That's not freedom. That's arrogance. With good PR. Now they tell me we're bringing freedom to Venezuela. Funny, I don't remember freedom ever traveling with tanks. Freedom has become a brand name, sold wholesale by lobbyists in Washington. Democracy, 2-for-1 deal if you act fast. The salesmen wear suits now, not uniforms. But the pitch is the same. We're not conquering. We're liberating. They said the same thing in Vietnam, and it still smells like gasoline and hypocrisy. The difference is, back then, we had excuses about communism. Now we've upgraded to humanitarian interests. Translation: we want their oil, and we need a reason that looks good on television. You don't invade a country because you hate tyranny. You invade because you love profit. The corporations funding this machine have no ideology beyond quarterly returns. They'll shake hands with dictators as long as the pipeline runs smooth. If freedom was really the goal, we'd have sent troops to protect union workers in Detroit, not oil rigs in Caracas. But no, freedom only matters when it's sitting on top of 300 billion barrels of crude. Vietnam had its jungles, Venezuela has its wells. In both, young men bleed for decisions made in air-conditioned offices. They call it national security. I call it organized looting with flags. And if you dare to question it, they'll call you unpatriotic. That's how it worked in Vietnam. Anyone who asked why we were there didn't support the troops. As if blind loyalty was bravery. As if silence was patriotism. I remember the photos from Vietnam villages reduced to ashes, children running from napalm, soldiers staring into nothing. And I remember the press conferences too, the polished lies, the body counts dressed up as progress. They said it was necessary, that it was working. It always is, right until the day it isn't. Venezuela will be no different. The missiles will fly, the cameras will roll, and the truth will be rationed like gasoline. They tell me Venezuela's people want our help. I've heard that one before. Vietnam's villagers wanted us there too, according to the reports. Most of them just wanted to be left alone, same as the Venezuelans will. But Washington can't leave anything alone that shines or burns or sells. We don't export democracy, we lease it. Short-term contracts, renewable every election cycle. And then there's the oil, the sticky, black heartbeat under every so-called noble cause. Vietnam had rubber, tin, and a place on the map. Venezuela has energy, rare minerals, and a strategic coastline. Freedom just happens to flow wherever pipelines lead. It's a strange coincidence that keeps repeating itself across continents. Maybe God really does bless America because every time he finds a resource, we find a reason to liberate it. The talking heads will say, Venezuela's people deserve democracy. Sure they do. So do we. But our democracy's drowning in money while we pretend to export it by drone. You can't teach freedom when you've sold your own. And I'm tired of the hypocrisy, the moral lectures from men who cash defense stocks between speeches. They talk about liberty like it's a product line. Liberty, now available in the Western Hemisphere. Vietnam was supposed to cure us of this disease, this pathological need to play savior. Instead, it gave the virus new tools, technology, propaganda, plausible deniability. The only thing we learned was how to hide the body count better. They replaced reporters with influencers, generals with analysts, and soldiers with mercenaries. Now the wars are live-streamed, sanitized, branded, the same cruelty, but with better Wi-Fi. When they say freedom, what they mean is control. When they say democracy, they mean compliance. Venezuela's not a threat because it's evil, it's a threat because it's independent. Vietnam was the same. The moment a small nation says, we'll decide our own fate, the empire gets nervous. It can't tolerate sovereignty. It confuses equality with rebellion. So when I see those polished men in suits talking about liberation, I don't hear policy, I hear sales pitches. I hear boardrooms, clinking glasses. I hear the echo of every war profiteer who ever smiled for the cameras and lied about morality. Vietnam was the test case. Venezuela the rerun. And we're still too arrogant to change the channel. Freedom isn't a drone strike. Democracy isn't a no-fly zone. You can't deliver either of them in a shipping container stamped, Made in the USA. If they really wanted to bring freedom, they'd start by freeing themselves from their own damn greed. It's incredible, really. Only America could manage to lose a war before it even begins. We've turned self-destruction into a national sport. Before the first bullet is fired, the same mistakes are already packed, polished, and ready to deploy arrogance, ignorance, and the delusion that history takes orders from the Pentagon. They said Vietnam would be over in a few months. They said Iraq would pay for itself. They said Afghanistan was unwinnable. Then tried anyway, for 20 years. Now they're sketching the same fantasy for Venezuela, quick, clean, surgical. They call it limited. Limited, like a hangover is limited. You can almost see the pattern on a chalkboard somewhere in D.C. Step 1. Underestimate the enemy. Step 2. Overestimate yourself. Step 3. Ignore every lesson you ever claimed to learn. It's like watching a drunk walk back into the same bar expecting a different bartender. The uniforms change, the PowerPoints improve, but the thinking is prehistoric. They believe technology can replace wisdom. They think drones can do what diplomacy can't. They forget that Vietnam had the best technology on the planet too, and it still ended with helicopters running for their lives. The first lie is always about time. This will be fast. The second is about purpose. We're here to help. The third is about cost. We can afford it. And when all three collapse, they invent a fourth. We can't leave now. That's the addiction cycle of empire. Denial, justification, escalation, regret. Vietnam proved it. Iraq confirmed it. Afghanistan perfected it. And yet, here they go again, lining up excuses like soldiers on parade. You know what's missing in all these strategy sessions? Memory. Institutional amnesia is the true American weapon. We forget faster than we fail. The same generals who quote lessons from Vietnam can't recognize them in real time. They say we'll win hearts and minds, as if bombing villages ever won a heart or cleared a mind. You can't win hearts with fear, and you can't buy minds with aid money. We tried both. Didn't work then, won't work now. The press loves it, the graphics, the drama, the ratings. A new front in the war on tyranny. Sounds catchy. Vietnam didn't have hashtags. Maybe that's why it looked uglier. Now we have filters for destruction. You can scroll through body counts between cat videos. Shock and awe has become click and share. We've digitized denial, turned war into entertainment, and the public exhausted, distracted nods along. Because losing feels distant when it's live-streamed in HD. The irony is that Venezuela doesn't even need to fight to win. All it has to do is survive. That's what Vietnam taught the world. You don't have to defeat America. You just have to outlast its attention span. The empire grows tired faster than it bleeds. And when the bills come due, the rich shrug and the poor pay. Every time. The defense contractors cash in, the politicians posture, and the soldiers bury their friends. That's the ledger of American warfare, always balanced in other people's blood. They'll say this isn't Vietnam because the terrain is different, the tactics more advanced. Sure, tell that to history. The terrain always changes. The stupidity stays the same. The belief that power guarantees victory, that's the virus. We've had it since the first Marine landed on a foreign shore. Vietnam was supposed to vaccinate us. Instead, it made us immune to humility. How do you lose a war you haven't started yet? Simple. You believe your own lies. You build a story so airtight it suffocates the truth before it's born. You assume the world will cheer while you redraw its borders. You forget that every bomb creates more enemies than it kills. You mistake fear for respect. And by the time you realize the difference, it's too late. Somewhere, a young officer is rehearsing the same press line that's been recycled for 60 years. We're making progress. The same phrase, used in Saigon, Baghdad, Kabul, maybe soon in Caracas. Progress toward what, exactly? The next apology. The next veterans' hospital. The next generation of disillusioned soldiers who come home and wonder why they believe the slogans. Vietnam left scars on their souls. Venezuela will do the same, only the soundtrack will be digital and the lies will have better lighting. The lesson of Vietnam was simple. Don't start wars you can't end. And don't pretend you're a hero when you're the arsonist. But Washington never learns. They rewrite the script, cast new actors, and call it policy. And the audience, the taxpayers, the mothers, the workers, they keep buying tickets. Because the empire never cancels a sequel. So, congratulations, America. You've done it again. Another unwinnable war, another invisible enemy, another generation sentenced to repeat the same damn lines. The only suspense left is how long it'll take before someone in a suit goes on television and says, "We were misled." No, Senator, you weren't misled. You were complicit. There's a cruel kind of comedy in all of this. The kind that doesn't make you laugh. It just makes you tired. Because the punchline never changes. Vietnam was the first draft of this joke, and we've been telling the same one for 60 years. This time we're smarter. This time we're right. This time we mean well. That's the setup. The punchline? Body bags, broken promises, and politicians pretending they didn't see it coming. History's joke is that it keeps handing us mirrors, and we keep calling them windows. They say America is exceptional, and it is exceptionally good at repeating its mistakes. Every new administration swears it's not like the last one. And then they hire the same people. You could swap out the names Johnson, Bush, Biden doesn't matter. The suits change, the arrogance doesn't. The machine runs on the same fuel: fear, greed, and self-righteousness. Vietnam was supposed to be the war that humbled us. Instead, it became the manual. We learned how to lose without admitting it, how to occupy without calling it invasion, how to bomb without showing blood. Now they're talking about Venezuela like it's some kind of moral duty. We can't stand by while tyranny spreads, they say, as if tyranny doesn't sign defense contracts in half the world. The media parrots it, the think tanks spin it, and the public, God bless them, they want to believe it. It's comforting to think your country is saving someone instead of robbing them. That's how empires survive, not on force, but on fiction. Vietnam was sold as a noble cause. Venezuela will be sold as a necessary one. Different era, same sales pitch. Sometimes I think the war never really ended. It just went corporate. The generals became consultants, the mercenaries became private contractors, and the body counts turned into quarterly reports. They don't need to censor reporters anymore. They just outprice them. And the soldiers? The soldiers still bleed. But now, they come home to hashtags instead of parades. Vietnam veterans were spit on. Venezuela veterans will be ignored. Progress, they call it. History doesn't repeat. It mocks. It watches from the sidelines while we argue about semantics and slogans. It whispers, "I told you so," every time another country burns under the banner of liberation. And you know what's tragic? We deserve it. Because we keep falling for the same con, the one where the good guys wear flags and the bad guys just happen to live on top of valuable resources. It's the oldest joke in the empire's repertoire, and somehow, we still don't get it. I've read the memos. I've seen the plans. The language is always the same. Limited engagement. Stabilization mission. Restoring order. It's poetry for bureaucrats, and poison for the poor. They talk about restoring order in other countries while ignoring the chaos in their own. They can't fix healthcare, can't fix poverty, can't fix education, but somehow they can fix Venezuela? Sure. Maybe after they finish fixing Vietnam. And somewhere out there, a kid's watching all this the way I once watched Vietnam, through a screen, confused, angry, asking why. In 50 years, he'll be the one saying, "I've seen this movie before." He'll quote the same statistics, write the same editorials, fight the same futility, because that's the real legacy of empire, not glory, not greatness, but the endless recycling of regret. So what's the lesson? Maybe there isn't one. Maybe the joke's on us. Maybe we're not the heroes in this story, just the loudest actors in a tragic farce. Vietnam should have been the warning label on history's bottle. Do not consume, may cause empire decay. But we drank it anyway. And now, as the drums beat for Venezuela, the same men who once denied Vietnam's body count are counting barrels of oil. They'll tell you this isn't about greed. They'll say it's about freedom, democracy, security. But if you listen closely, beneath all the noise, you'll hear the truth humming like an engine that never stops. It's not freedom they're after, it's control. It's not democracy, it's dominance. And it's not security, it's profit. The rest is just marketing. History's joke is simple. It gives you the answers in advance, and you still fail the test. Vietnam was the question. Venezuela is the retake. And America? America is still cheating off its own lies. So here we are again, pretending this time will be different. It won't. Because you can't fix a system that doesn't make mistakes, it makes money. You can't teach humility to men who believe they own the world. And you can't win a war that started with a mirror. The joke's over. We just haven't realized we're the punchline.